All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the Supreme Court decisions we've seen. I'm going to be mainly talking about their hesitance to take up any gun rights cases, because for me that's the most meaningful. Dwelling briefly here on the DACA situation, though, actually the decision does sort of make sense, because what they're saying is that the way in which DACA was going to be particularly canceled was the problem. They're not saying that ending it is unconstitutional. This was what John Roberts pointed out. In fact, 8 of the justices said it would be ultimately fine. The only holdout was Sotomayor. Sotomayor said that it would be, for some odd reason, I believe, unlawful to even end DACA, which is clearly wrong. You've got an executive action that was never even duly passed by Congress, and now you have the Supreme Court obstructing its ending. I do have a problem with this. However, John Roberts known for doing this. Like, he did this on the ACA. You remember, the only person in the country who construed the ACA as a tax was John Roberts for the purposes of giving it the green light, essentially, in a split decision. And, of course, now it's been completely gutted. There's another case going forward through Texas, I believe, even now, to get rid of the remnant of the ACA. And as far as other decisions the court is making, like its LGBT decision, I actually support. No, I mean, if you're going to prevent employers from discriminating based on race or gender or something, why would the fact that a person is gay or a lesbian or something be any different? Again, you can bicker over the purpose of equal protection under the law, but if you're going to construe it that way historically, it would, I think, extend to gay people. That being said, on gun rights, that's the one that's most meaningful. And of course, I disagree with SCOTUS' decision to not take up these cases. It's better than bullseyeing gun rights, but you've got to understand, we don't really have a conservative court anyway. We have a liberal court, essentially. John Roberts is essentially a liberal. He's a neocon. He was put in there by Bush. He's the Chief Justice. He is not a conservative individual, not like Gorsuch or some of these others. He's a liberal, essentially. Anyone considering him to be far right is completely off their rocker. Hell, Gorsuch isn't that conservative either on many issues. He sides with the liberal majority on some issues, and on other issues he goes to the right. He's more of a mixed bag. He's exactly what I expected, by the way, from Trump, and I think is so far doing a very good job. But John Roberts, not so much. So it's almost a good thing that they wouldn't take up gun rights cases, because my fear is that John Roberts is getting more liberal over time as well. And the thing with our Chief Justice is this. I can read him like a book. He cares more about pragmatism and social stability than he does actually strictly construing the Constitution. That is, he thinks more about the fallout of the decision than whether the decision is legally coherent in the first place. That's to his benefit sometimes, but I don't think that you're going to see a societal breakdown by expanding the use of the Second Amendment. The fact is that in some of these cases, the violation of the Second Amendment is so egregious that it's unconscionable that even a liberal individual could possibly construe the Second Amendment the way it's being construed at the state level. Letting those state decisions stand, by the way, just kicks the can down the road. The violation's still there. Other cases will go forward. SCOTUS will be continuously bombarded by plaintiffs who are mad at their states for violating one of their fundamental constitutional rights. The fact is that if the litmus test were, yes, the state can turn rights into privileges, that the Constitution basically has no purpose, what would they do if the First Amendment were being challenged this way? What if the state said you need to get a license, there's an onerous system for doing so in order to exercise your free speech rights? The Supreme Court would laugh the case out of court in a 9-0 decision and say, yes, of course, you can speak freely. The First Amendment is ironclad. But when it comes to guns, John Roberts argues the pragmatist, and he's like, whoa, wait, gun control kind of sort of works. I don't think we want to expand guns further. Let's let the issue stew at the state level. They did this also with gay marriage. You'll remember. Egregious violations of American civil liberties, their right to obtain a marriage contract, the state contract deals with property, was being violated systemically for years. The Supreme Court could have weighed in and said, yeah, of course, people who are gay should be able to get this contract. In that case, they wisely decided otherwise until a majority of states had already legalized it themselves, and the social issue had begun to die down anyway, because most people had come to the conclusion, yes, gay people should be able to be married under state law, because it's an issue of equal protection for property purposes mainly. They very wisely decided that. My worry, though, is that they're trying to do the same thing with gun rights. But there's really no debate to be had. The Second Amendment is completely ironclad, and gun control has been dying over the last few decades anyway. It's already moving in a conservative direction. This particular culture war is one that's being won by the right wing, largely. More and more people own guns. Every time there's social stress, people buy guns. You have new gun owners and more guns in circulation. A lot of them are not registered. You have a lot of straw purchase sort of private sales. The amount of weaponry there is too large to ever confiscate. The issue has already been basically destroyed. You got to understand, in the wake of Cruikshank, which was a far left decision by segregationists, Jim Crowites, in the 1870s, gun control peaked in the 1800s in the United States. It started existing in the 1870s and essentially peaks then. A lot of people didn't really see guns as useful for anything other than hunting, and the urban population, other than maybe a little pepper box, largely wasn't armed. These days, even people in cities sometimes have an arsenal. Guns are arguably as common now as they were in parts of the Old West. Back then, when you had proto-gun control, which was essentially the sheriff in an unincorporated territory would tell you to check your guns at the gate of the village in order to keep people from gunfighting in the streets, which by the way, didn't violate the Constitution because they were unincorporated territories at the time. Interesting political fact there. But gun control needs to go out the window completely. All existing gun control already violates the Constitution. We definitely don't need more. And in many states, you've got a recension of gun control. Concealed carry, shall issue, constitutional carry, open carry states, that's all expanded. The number of states with restrictions on magazine size and things like that, it's essentially limited to blue states. It's essentially limited to states that are far left anyway, and they don't like the Second Amendment because they're afraid of people with guns. They think that you're bumpkins or whatever. I can see parts of the country going in the other direction, from blue to red, that is. And then there are parts that are going from red to blue, southeast notoriously. I think that SCOTUS should weigh in, just fucking get it over with. And you can have a mixed bag of decision-making, too. If you've got 10 gun control cases, it's not that I expect Roberts to rule pro-gun in all 10 cases. I think it would be 50-50. But I think it's important, clearly, the inability to purchase a weapon because the state is attempting to insinuate that you need a legitimate reason to own one is clearly unconstitutional. No such litmus test exists in the Constitution. McDonald versus Chicago is already fairly clear and straightforward. The federal government couldn't do that. The federal government couldn't come along and pass a rule tomorrow saying, well, in order for citizens to own a gun, we want them to fill out a questionnaire, and if we're not satisfied with why they want a gun, we're not going to give it to them. You wouldn't be able to do that. It'd be blatantly unconstitutional. But McDonald versus Chicago already subjugates the states to the same mentality, that the Second Amendment applies to them, not just the federal government. So do the other amendments. You know, clearly, a state can't just violate your constitutional rights because it primarily is a federal doctrine. That's already been decided. That was, what, 2006, 2008, something like that? That was a long time ago. So I think that SCOTUS, kicking the can down the road, is unhelpful. Keeps the issue simmering. It creates a situation where you've got like a red state, blue state sort of thing, where citizens are being explicitly denied equal access under the law to their Second Amendment constitutional rights. Again, if this applied to the First or the Fourth, or any of the or to trials, to cruel and unusual punishment, to anything else in the Constitution, the Supreme Court would take the case up immediately and it would bullseye it completely. It would completely lay waste to the argument. It would be a 9-0 decision. Only on firearms is it a split decision. Only on firearms do they say, well, it's not an important enough right for us to make a binding decision now. We're going to wait for the future. And this, by the way, is why we desperately need to re-elect Trump. Can you imagine if any of the actual conservative justices croaks and you've got a Biden presidency? Well, you can say goodbye to your gun rights at that point because John Roberts won't even need to agree to take up the case. The liberals would just run roughshod over it, and you know they'll be waiting for the decisions. They'll definitely take it, but they won't show such restraint. They'll gladly take them up. Oh, yeah, it's okay if the state says that you can't own a gun unless you have a proper reason. Yeah, it's okay if the state bans semi-automatic weapons. Yeah, it's okay if the state mandates you can only carry the bullets in your pocket loosely and you can't even pre-fill a mag. Yeah, it's okay if magazines are outlawed. Yeah, it's okay if you can't have anything other than a BB gun. This sounds hyperbolic, but the thing is, there are people that make those arguments. There are people that legitimately believe that, and there are people that, in their minds, legitimately construe the Second Amendment as having such applications. Again, it is the only amendment that's subject to this. No other amendment is treated in the same fashion. So I think we definitely need to look at that. We definitely need to look at the composition of SCOTUS when we think about who we want to be the next president. That's about all. Peace out.